My name's VincentBerry, author of Lance by Chance, Wrestling as a Von Erich. You can get the book on Amazon or at lancebychance.com. And you can read more of my stories and hear my podcast at Wrestleville.com. You're listening to the Loudmouth Presents Off the Top Rope.
In conjunction with specialized supplements.
Of all ages, once again, it is time, that wonderful time of the week where we go off the top rope. And this week we are talking about wrestling autobiographies, because there's a lot of wrestling autobiographies out there. But the one I'm specifically going to be talking about today is the one, it's called Lance by Chance. And in the book itself, it's got a few chapters on South Africa. And we've got the author of that book, VincentBerry, with us. Vincent, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me, Donovan.
Awesome. Lance by Chance. Now, the Lance von Erich wrestling persona is one that is steeped in wrestling controversy. From when he started professional wrestling and all the stuff in between. How did you, when you started doing this book, how did you find you had to separate some of the fact from some of the fiction?
Well, I talked to, maybe a dozen people on about the book. So, after hearing the version of the story, 12 different versions or whatever it was, you just kind of boil it down, and if it doesn't match up, then you don't use it. If it matches up and it aligns with everything else, then you go with it. It was important for me to get the truth out, and there were some things that, there's a lot of rumors that surrounded the death of David Von Erich. There was a lot of so I was really careful in that regard, because did I want to put out the same stuff that was being put out, or did I want to be careful and try to put out the truth? And if I couldn't get to the truth, how much time we wanted to spend on it. So there was a lot of things like that we took in consideration, and things that I kind of struggled with as far as getting the actual facts.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned through our talkings and things like that it wasn't a quick process. Walk us through the timing of the meetings and how many meetings you had and how long this actually came to fruition.
I started talking to Lance, I think like June or July of 2017.
Right.
And we started talking, and that time it was just, it wasn't consistent. It was just like I had talked to him, and then I had written a story about him for my website, and then we started talking again, and I thought that I was always fascinated with this story, and so I thought that it would make for a good story, and so we decided, I think it was in August of 2017, that we would work on a book together, and we talked for about every Sunday on the telephone for about an hour or so. Sometimes he could only give a half hour. Sometimes it was an hour and a half. Sometimes, but we did that consistently for about a year. I think, there was some breaks. I think he left the country for, he took six, there was a few months off that I couldn't get in touch with him. So, but for about a year, I guess a year and a half, we were interviewing over the telephone. And then I was just transcribing all the interviews, going through all the notes, just trying to piece that stuff together. And it really was like a puzzle, because I mean, one week we would talk about, let's say, Portland, and then the third, this next week we talk about South Africa, and then we talk about Dallas, and then that week following week we talk about more South Africa, and then we talk about Portland again, and it was all over the place. It wasn't like, let me take you from the beginning, and it was really all over the place. So sifting through all that, and I had about 40 hours of audio. Wow. So it took quite some time.
Right. And just specifically on the stuff about South Africa, I mean, when Lance was wrestling here in South Africa, I mean, it was the bad old days. It was the 80s and apartheid, and coming into the mid to early 80s and into the early 90s and things like that. Were you actually surprised not only about how professional wrestling was in South Africa, but some of the stories that came out of there? Because I know you can't publish every story that he gave you.
Right. Well, yeah, I was really surprised about South Africa because I had no idea. You got to understand, when I was living over here in the States and Lance just popped on the scene in October of 1985, and then he left in April of, I guess it was May of 19.
It was 86 or 87. No, it was 87.
87, yeah. 1987. And when he did that, he disappeared. So when I found out that he was wrestling, another 8 or plus years or whatever it was in South Africa, I was really surprised. And then, a lot of it sounded like, to me, like the wrestling that was described to me in Puerto Rico, where people would get involved, like you would have interaction from the fans, physical interaction from the fans. Lance talks about in the book about someone trying to set fire to one of the rings. Dogs were coming in, lights were going out. They had the riot squad come in, and I've never seen that in a wrestling match in United States. I mean, if you do that in United States, they'd have a Senate hearing on pro wrestling, right? I mean, they're like,
they'll come after you guys.
Right. I mean, hey, they love their freedom of speech over here, but boy, when it starts infringing on somebody else, they kind of get a little concerned. So
that's it.
Yeah, so I never seen anything like that. And so when he was telling me those stories, it sounded like Puerto Rico to me. So I was very interested in trying to be very detailed in getting and I talked to Jeff Bearden, I talked to Dusty Wolf quite a bit, and they helped with a lot of the stories. So it was fun to explore that part of his story.
I was a young boy. I was about 7, 8, 9 years old, around about then, and we went to a lot of local wrestling and things like that. And I watched Jeff Bearden wrestle a lot, and I watched Lance wrestle quite a bit. And in 2010, along on my wrestling journey, Jeff came back to South Africa in 2010, around about through the time of the World Cup, and he showed me his scar that he's got in his side. And Jeff's 7 foot tall, and that scar is literally I think about 15 or 16 inches, where he actually got stabbed in Durban at one of these events, and they had to get some of these guys out there that were holding chairs above their heads as shields because the stones were just coming in. It was very interesting. I've had interactions with Lance where he was actually. It's very, very strange that an international wrestler comes to South Africa and he's billed as the babyface. Because we would get the Minnesota Wrecking Crew coming over here. We get a lot of big Canadians coming over here, and it was always the foreign invasion and things like that. And here comes Lance von Erich, big American blonde hair, white trunks, all the ladies would just, you just see ladies swooning wherever they go. And he's taking on these Americans as the South African, as the local hero. It was such a weird dynamic, but it worked so well. And Lance settled down here. He had businesses here. You know, some of the stuff was legal. Some of the stuff was not as legal as you'd hope. But he made a good living in South Africa.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and he touches on that. That was one of the things that I liked working with Lance so much, was that he was very transparent to the point where, you know, I would say, hey, do you really want me to write about that? I mean, you know, there was some things that he would tell me while we were talking, and I have a English teacher who was like spending a lot of time with me, right? So I'd send her something that I wrote, and I said, hey, take a look at this. What do you think about this? And she goes, give me more detail. So when I talked to Lance, I'd ask all these details, and he'd tell me something, and I'd say, okay, so what was that about? And let me talk about that. And he'd go, whoa, you're not going to write about that, are you? And I said, well, I thought I would. He goes, wait, please don't write about that. And I was like, okay, I won't write about that. And then we crossed something else that was what I thought was 10 times worse, right? And I was like, yeah, you don't want to write about that, do you? He goes, why not? Yeah, stick that in there. Why wouldn't you put that in there? And I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so it was kind of fun, but what I liked about him was his honesty. And you know, I think a lot of people here in the States expected the book to come out and bash the Von Erichs, because when I was promoting the book, they were like, well, I know it's going to be full of lies and a bunch of trash. And I was like, dude, what are you talking about? There's like, they felt like, because nobody knew the real story, right? I mean, the Von Erichs came on TV here in America and buried them, right? So they felt like, well, if he's going to write a book, he's going to come out and bury them. And the fact of the matter is he did it. If he buries anybody in that book, it's himself, you know?
Yeah. Well, I want to change. I just want to change tack away from the book for a moment. In our previous interactions, you mentioned right about the age of 14 years old, where you yourself got involved in professional wrestling and things like that. Tell us a bit about your story when it comes to professional wrestling.
Well, it was a while until I got into it, right? I mean, I moved to North Texas where the Von Erichs were. I was about 10 or 11.
Right.
And I didn't really jump on the wrestling train until, it was like we'd be out with friends. At that time, it was like on Saturday evening or something.
Yeah.
And we'd be hanging out with the kids in the afternoon on a Saturday, and they'd all be going home. It was like, dude, I thought we were riding bikes, and hey, we'll be back in an hour, you know. And they were going home. They were going home to watch wrestling, you know. Yeah. And so since I had nothing to do, I'd check out this wrestling, and I thought, wow, no wonder they're taking a break to go visit this. And then shortly after that, I was with my parents. We went up to Pennsylvania to visit my grandmother. Mm-hmm. And one day we were getting out of church, and we went into a convenience store across the street from church, and there was a magazine rack, and I was looking at, and there was this magazine with Dusty Rhodes and Terry Funk on the front cover of the magazine was a barbed wire fence match, and they were covered with blood.
I know the one. I know the photograph you're talking about.
Okay, and I saw this magazine, and I went to my dad, and I was like, Dad, can I buy this magazine? And he goes, do you want to buy that magazine? I said, yes, I do. And he goes, well, ask the clerk to stick it in the bag so your mother won't see it. I'll talk to her about it later, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty graphic, right?
Right.
But, from that point on, I mean, I started subscribing to the magazines. Mm-hmm. I was reading magazines. I get like, I don't know, 2 magazines, 3 magazines a month, if that. I mean, but I was reading, and my parents were like, wow, the kid won't stop reading. We finally found something that he'll read, So they didn't care, that I was that it was wrestling magazines is they were just glad that I was reading something, right?
There we go.
So
there we go.
yeah, and I man, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the following the stories. I like the fact that I could get a magazine and read about an area that I was never going to go to. You know, I could read about Eddie Gilbert and Tommy Rich and Ron Bass and all these guys.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was right there in my living room. You know, it was really cool.
Yeah, it must have been awesome because, like you say, you're staying in North Texas, but the guys you mentioned were from Florida. So you're talking about you're looking at guys that were there from magazines from guys in Florida, and you're in Texas, and there's probably a kid in Florida that picks up a magazine and he's looking at the magazine from Texas and looking at the Von Erichs. So you know, we in South Africa we had a different thing here. We back in those days. We had a store called CNA, Central News Agency, and we used to get the WWF magazine every single month, and they only used to put out one copy. And that copy was all dog-eared and everything like this, and all the pages were turned and things like this. The magazine place actually kept 10 copies, but because it was so expensive to get the magazine from there to here, they would only put out one copy, let everybody ruin the one copy. And if you wanted to buy the magazine, they'd bring a fresh one in, a dust jacket and everything for you outside. But I mean, the magazines were the equivalent of $70, $80 to get a magazine. So it was wildly expensive, man. But you could tell the last Friday of every month, you'd see like 14-year-old, 15-year-old guys, and it would just be down the one aisle where the sports magazines were, and it was just that magazine. All the other magazines were left alone, just the wrestling magazine. And man, some of it was great. I actually only got into Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine in about 98. So
okay.
Yeah. The book itself. Now, there's other stuff in there that you've spoken about. I mean, we got the Japanese tour, we got the Israeli tour, we got Jeff mentioned on when he was on Off the Top Rope, I think it was 4 episodes ago. He mentioned the train bombing in India that they were involved in, where they were on the train and then the mail car got bombed. Do you look at some of those stories and listen to some of those stories, and 12 guys are telling the same story, and you're like, wow, man, things in the wrestling world aren't all black and white.
Yeah, well, when you're talking to one person about this stuff, you think, wow, that's pretty crazy stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it takes a little while for it to sink in. But then when you talk to Kamala, and then he tells you about the train bombing and all the newspaper, and it said it looked like it was snowing, and then you talk to Dusty Wolf, and he says the same thing, and so it's like, wow, it was pretty amazing, and of course that the whole thing about that, which was very interesting, was that the religious sect that was, I guess, that bombed that train, the wrestlers were really a part of their target. They were trying to kidnap these guys and hold them for ransom or kill them, only for something that happened a year prior to them, and they were just really I guess gonna do it to somebody who had notoriety and where they could kind of like, well, we killed these wrestlers, and that was pretty crazy to me, but of course, when I was young and watching the news of that stuff, like in foreign countries, it was like, oh, that stuff happened over there. And now over here in America, we have all these terrorists attacks and people of our own country shooting up schools and supermarkets and stuff like that. And so it's like, it's kind of like we finally caught up with the rest of the world, right? So
I get you. Vincent, what are you currently working on? What's next for VincentBerry?
Well, I want to continue telling stories in wrestling, and I am taking some stories, some short stories that I've written, and I am combining them in a book with about 200 to 300 pictures from the Gulf Coast region of the United States, which is parts of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, I guess the western side of Florida. But we've got a lot of pictures from this. My friend John Paul LeBlanc has been filming or taking photographs for probably 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
And basically gave me all his files and said, you do something with them. So I have all these pictures and these stories, and I'm gonna make a compilation, to preserve some of these stories and these pictures. And so I'm working on that. It's called Wrestleville, the Gulf Coast region and more, Volume 1, and then I have a Volume 2 that I've already started putting together, but I'm finishing up the printing process for Volume 1, and I'm hoping to have that out by June. But you get down to formatting and all that, and preparing it. Sometimes a little pop up, and you kind of did. Just some kind of slow you down, and you have to kind of change your sail a little bit. That's where we're at. And we're just formatting the book right now. Actually, as I was talking to you, someone was sending me some messages about what did you want me to do with this, and hey, I noticed this and that. So yeah, that's what we're doing. We're just preserving these memories of and there's a movement of Gulf Coast wrestling where not only veterans go down there and work it, but there's a lot of new people that are popping up that are really intriguing and amazing workers that we want to just give more attention to. So that's what we're doing with this book. We're just kind of doing our own thing, and being at peace with it, having a good time with it.
Sure. So Wrestleville, right? Wrestleville.
Yes, Wrestleville. It's
Wrestleville.
Donovan.
Yeah.
Donovan. Wrestleville. Wrestleville is where wrestling lives.
Ah, there we go. There we go. I love that. It sounds like a fantastic concept, and I can't wait for it to come to fruition, because I love things like that. I love the history of professional wrestling.
And what's interesting about the Volume 2, because I finished up the Volume 1 and I started making connections, right?
Yeah.
I met a guy in the state of Ohio who's had a promotion for 30 years.
Wow.
And he gave me access to his promotion, his pictures. I'm going to do a short story on him. And, so yeah, the book is called Gulf Coast Wrestling and More, but he's going to be part of that more, where I want, it's kind of going to be like a territory magazine in a book, where it's going to bring light and introduce people to wrestlers, to people who just don't have access to doing that, might not have had the opportunity to see some of these people.
Right. So you mentioned about 200 to 300 photographs in the volumes and things like that of Wrestleville Volume 1. How many photographs did you actually get? Because I know you can only put in 200 or 250 or 300 or whatever it may be. How many photographs did you actually get?
Well, we have like 15 years of files, 15,
wow.
So I think he goes back all the way to like 2010, so maybe 11 years, but he's got like some like sometimes he's been to 20 shows a year, so
Yeah.
I'm going through all these files, and all these pictures. He has like 500 pictures in one file, so
Wow.
I just go through there and I look for people who I know or just I try to tell stories with the pictures as well.
Right.
So
Right.
I've got some like matchup and things like that. But
Sure.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, that's why we've probably put out 3 or 4 more books.
Yeah. Well, we got a gentleman that when we do our wrestling shows, he takes photographs. We call him Uncle Stan. He's a phenomenal guy, a great guy. He's like a Japanese tourist. He's just got like 3 or 4 cameras hanging off of him, and he's just taking photographs of everything. Like absolutely everything. And we say, hey, Uncle Stan, I hope you enjoyed the show, blah, blah, blah. He goes, I'll send you the first file later. And then you get the first file and it's 213 photographs of the first match. It's like, oh, well, we had six matches on the card. He's like, well, I'll send them one at a time. And then it's 296 photos, 312 photos, 496 photos. And eventually you've got you've done an event that's an hour and a half, 2 hours long, but you've got 2,500 photographs you need to get through.
Right. And when I look through the pictures as well, is like there's some pictures that are good, right? But I won't use because like if me and you are wrestling in a picture, right? But I can't see who you are, but you can only see like the profile of me.
Yeah.
It really, even if I put a subtitle down, it really doesn't matter, right? But I'd like to see your face and my face. So I'm sifting through these pictures, kind of really, I have a specific look in mind, that I'm looking for. I want, again, to tell a story with these pictures, and just because it's a good wrestling picture doesn't mean that I want to stick it in the book, because again, I want people to be engaged in the stories and I want them to pick up the book. And, even after time, they go back and look at the pictures again. They said, hey, I don't remember this picture being in
That's
there.
it.
Like, wow,
Well,
so
with all those pictures in there, you can do volume 1, you can do volume 2, and then you can just do like the picture book of professional wrestling and actually like do a timeline, do 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, and actually put them out as a timeline from when you first started the information to right at the end.
And what's cool about this book too was I kind of toyed around with this idea, but I kind of changed my mind on it, but we went ahead and we ended up doing it. So it has probably about 15 stories in the beginning, has about 200-300 pictures in the middle. Then it has another 15 stories, and then it has another picture section. All right.
Wow.
And then after that, it'll have like promo pictures. So we'll have, like so-and-so from Alabama and Mississippi. It'll have a few superstars from each promotion down there. And if you have that book, and you have a pen, you go up, hey, sign my book, and there you go. You've got like an instant autograph book, so that was something we wanted to try. And again, we wanted to kind of like do a magazine inside a book, also too, there's a lot of pictures and stories of wrestlers that have already passed away. And again, this is, preserving those memories and keeping, this stuff intact. And because there's people coming up behind me, they don't know who Harley Race is, and they don't know who, Bobby Fulton is or Ricky Morton. They don't know these guys, and I think it's our job or responsibility. Hey, if you're a wrestling fan, know who these guys are,
That's it. Always, I was told a very, very good piece of advice from a local wrestler here who sadly passed away. He said, Don, always remember this: leave wrestling a better place than when you found it. And it is so important to keep that legacy going. Vincent, there's one last question before I ask you to do all the...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. There's one last question I want to ask before we do all the social media plugs and we say our goodbyes and all of that stuff. In your machinations with professional wrestling, you have got to put together a 5-on-5 traditional Survivor Series style match. You've got 5 good guys on the one side, 5 bad guys on the other side. Who's your good guys? Who's your bad guys? No limits on era, no limits on injury. 5-on-5.
All right.
Let's hear it.
My bad guys would be Eddie Gilbert, Stan Stasiak, the Great Kabuki, Bruiser Brody, and Stan Hansen.
Oh, hard-hitting team. Wow, my goodness. Who's going to referee that?
And that's right off the top of my head. It's not like I sit around and thought about that. I gave that to you. Now, my baby faces?
Yeah.
It'll be Kerry Von Erich.
Okay.
Tommy Rich.
Right.
Did I say Bruno Sammartino as a heel?
No, you did not.
Okay. Bruno Sammartino will be on my good guy side.
Right.
So Bruno Sammartino, Tommy Rich, Kerry Von Erich. Let's go Dusty Rhodes and Doink the Clown.
Are you doing Matt Bourne's Doink the Clown?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Man,
yeah.
That is the promos that are going to be coming out of there. My goodness.
Let's keep it lively, right?
Keep it lively. Yeah. I always look at some of the old promos from the 70s and 80s, and my comment remains the same. Steroids and cocaine are a hell of a combination.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. Vincent?
Yes.
You have now got the floor. Please plug all your social medias, where we can find Lance by Chance, where we can find you specifically on all the social medias. Please go ahead.
Well, you told me that you found Lance by Chance on Amazon in your country, correct?
That is correct.
So in your country, you can order it on Amazon, and I believe the paperback version and the digital version is available to you. Please check that out. You know, that was really a labor of love. I think people will really be surprised about how he was discovered and some of the things that he struggled with and some of the things that he went through. You know, it wasn't like he was a wrestler. He was just kind of handed this opportunity and he ran with it. And it's very interesting to see the interactions he had. You know, there's a chapter in there of Billy Jack Haynes, Ric Flair, Steve Simpson. There's stories about Chris Adams, Gino Hernandez, Bruiser Brody, and it really covers, unfortunately, it covers all the tragedies that took place in the world-class area, but it also touches on South Africa and some of the things that he got into over there. And for your readers, I think will be surprised that, you know, it's kind of broken up into 3 parts. You know, you got the Northwest, Pacific Northwest area, you got the Texas area, and then you've got the South African section, you know, so it all fits in. You can find me on lancebychance.com. There's an email address on there. If you want to contact me, you can contact me there as well. Sure. I have a website called Wrestleville.com, and it's one word, and it is exactly how it sounds, like Wrestleville. And there's stories on there. There's also a new podcast on there. I have podcasts with Tokyo Monster Haggis, Jackson Stone. I have one coming up with Just Incredible. I have one coming up with who do I got in the can? Well, I just posted Scott Casey and Jimmy Rave. You know, a lot of American wrestlers. Awesome. But I've got some good stuff coming with that as well. And so and then my book, Wrestleville, the Gulf Coast region and more, volume 1, and probably be on Amazon by fall your time. So, or
Right,
by
okay,
fall
perfect.
on Amazon.
Perfect.
That's
Great.
my plan.
Awesome. Vincent, I thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the information you shared with us, man, and we wish you the best of luck. We'll be looking out for that stuff. All the watchers and subscribers to Off the Top Rope, please take a look at Vincent's social medias. We'll be putting it on the website itself. We thank you very much for your time, sir. Have a great afternoon.
All right, you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This has been Loudmouth Presents Off the Top Rope, uncensored, uncut, and hopefully leaving it in a better place than when we found it.